Today I want to talk about chaos and order through entropy. So, entropy implies that for things to go from a state of order to another state of order, it must first go through a period of chaos. And what I mean by chaos is a state of completely unpredictable events that are highly unpredictable because they are extremely unlikely, but they occur all the time. They occur when you have a coffee and you mix milk into it. All the different swirls that the milk makes in the coffee before it becomes a uniformly mixed in coffee with milk. If I were to have a book that was 1,000 pages and rip it and throw it into the air, if I were to pick up all the pages one by one, it would highly likely than not be in a different rearrangement. It wouldn't be from 1 to 1,000. All the pages would be mixed up. Now, I can't rule out and say that there's no chance of the pages being picked up in the exact same order they were before it got thrown. But the likes of that happening is extremely low compared to any other figuration. If I were to open a bottle of Coke, the carbon atoms would escape the bottle immediately. There is a very minuscule chance that the carbon atoms, once they leave the bottle, they could return back into the bottle. You can't rule it out as it won't happen because there is a chance it could happen. But like I said, the likes of that happening is completely, probably, like statistically speaking, it's very low compared to all the other configurations of all the carbon atoms that could exist. And so what I'm trying to say by explaining that is when we try to go from point A to point B, it's not a linear process. It's never a linear process. You can't just go from point A to point B by having a cookie cutter mold, by having a ruler out and drawing precise lines as to how you're going to get there. You probably can do that in some scenarios, but how likely is it than not that you have a plan, a foolproof plan, and something goes astray, something unpredictable happens, and then we begin to stress and things never go exactly how we plan them to go unless there is no variables existing, which is incredibly unlikely because everything affects everything. So in chaos theory, it suggests that things naturally go towards routes of unpredictability, and there is patterns within this unpredictability. Think of it as fractals. There's fractals of patterns that exist within this chaos. So if we're talking about fractals, I want you to imagine the cup of coffee I was talking about earlier. There's a black cup of coffee and milk is mixed into it. When the milk drops into the cup, there's a moment of tension where the milk is not mixed in with the coffee at all. And before that happens, what begins to happen is that tension breaks, and all of a sudden, there's on the molecular level, there's interactions between the coffee and the milk combining in all areas. So in all of the molecular structure of the milk begins to chemically react with the coffee and begins to combine. And in those moments, those fractals, they become fractals and they're combining with each other until they are homogenized and you have yourself a coffee with milk. And in that stage, when the coffee isn't quite mixed with the milk, you can't predict in what formation the swirls are going to mix with each other. You could like chuck it through a system and print out all the different possibilities it could happen. But what good would that do you to figure out the odds of something so tiny? You could technically write down all the different combinations of ones to a thousands, or the pages could get rearranged in the book you threw. But what actual good would knowing the probability of each incident's happening have on the outcome? Nothing. It's minuscule. And we tend to get trapped in the illusion of analyzing something to such a degree that it's just for our own comfort. There's no necessary practical necessity in doing so, because it's something that by the laws of nature can't be predicted, isn't meant to be predicted. It just happens. And it's not until I found acceptance in that I stopped overanalyzing and being stuck in analysis paralysis, because systems with large numbers, so populations and everything, like things with steps in them, things with variables, they are all susceptible to this chaos. But there is an order in the chaos, which doesn't make quite sense. So, best way I can explain this is when you have an egg and it rolls off the table and it falls on the floor. That egg, before it falls off the bench, it's in a whole state. It is not in a chaotic state. As soon as it hits the ground and the shell cracks, it becomes in a state of chaos, because all the different particles begin to splinter off and break. And each break, if you look at it at a microscopic level, at the smallest level possible, if you just think about it, each break leads to another break, leads to another break, leads to another break. They all break in a certain arrangement, and this is happening simultaneously at a wild scale that you don't even see or notice unless you think about it. And that's the order within the chaos. And synchronicity, it's synchronicity. And once you begin to look at things that way and notice them, then you begin to pick up on patterns in your own life, in your own ways of doing things. And you begin to notice that pattern within the bigger scale of things that are not predictable. Because let's be real for a second. Nothing is predictable. We try to predict things to feel safe, to expect something that cannot be expected, but that's just an illusion that we create for ourselves. If you really want to try and find the order within the chaos, then it's to pay attention to the patterns that occur within the chaos, the fractals that naturally occur all the time. So, yeah, I hope that made sense. I just think it's really important to realize that, because we go our whole lives just trying to make sense of things that aren't supposed to be made sense of. But it's not completely eternally doomed. There is sense to be made, but just not in the way that you think. I always think that making art is simply just a way of seeing the world. And once you start to realize that, it starts showing up in your work. The flow state that you're looking for is within these patterns that we're not trained to see. We haven't been taught to see. And yeah, It's really interesting. I asked in my last video whether you feel the most alive when you're creating art or analyzing it. And I wanted to answer that question by saying that it is when I create art, because when I'm fully tuned in, I am not trying to fit my work into a box that was pre-planned, and I'm open to letting things unfold in the moment as they do, instead of being fixed on an outcome and trying to achieve it, which never happens. It never goes the way that you think it will. And I found that the sooner I realized that, the sooner I was free. Because it creates a limiter. You limit yourself through that perception of expecting things to be a certain way. Anyways, I really hope that you got something out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.